we go. I shall be.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to Denby Dale Amateur Radio Club. Good to see people back again. I have seen most of you at the club annual general meeting, but we're very pleased indeed to have Chris here, G7OOD from Oldham Amateur Radio Club. And I think it was a conversation that Kevin, G1FYS, had with Chris a few months ago about electric cars. And I think we've been having discussions in the club about the wonderful delights of batteries and what we can do with batteries and what's happening to the technology in that field. And Kevin was having that conversation with Chris, and it's a field of work that Chris, I know, works in. And he's done a talk on electric cars. And I know I put this in the email to people. It's not quite amateur radio, but it is being delivered by a very active radio amateur. So I'm quite sure, Chris, that you'll have things to say of interest to everyone in the room here this evening. And of course, you know, as a radio amateur, I'm sure there are analogies that you can draw with various bits of the technology that will interest everyone. But hey, look, we're all radio amateurs. I don't expect there's a single person in the room here tonight who isn't absolutely fascinated with all aspects of technology when it involves electricity and anything to do with gadgets, including mechanical gadgets. It's something we're all interested in and enjoy playing with to different degrees. So Chris, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you and enable you to take it away.
Right, thank you, Nick. Just firing up the presentation. Yeah, it does actually revolve around PCs that don't have go slow. It does revolve around electric cars. This talk originally evolved from the simple fact on the air I was being asked a lot of questions, things like electric cars do this, electric cars do that, and there's a lot of myths out there, a lot of mysteries, and also it is amateur related at the actual end, because I will show you some of the pitfalls when it comes to us going mobile. We've all seen the adverts. I don't know if anybody can remember last time you saw an advert for an actual petrol car or a diesel car. Everything seems to be hybrid nowadays, or I'm just checking. Yeah, can everybody see that?
We haven't got anything on the screen.
Haven't you? Right.
No,
hang on. Here. Hang on. Oops. Right. Let's have a look. Hang on. Sorry about this.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah. I'll switch that on afterwards. Like I say, the camera. I think I've just disturbed the connection. That's all. There's umpteen USBs going on here. Yeah, this originally came about by people asking questions, especially when I was on the air about electric cars, once they found out that I was part of the development of them and into the design and the technology behind some of the modern day electric cars. And there's a lot of myths out there. So I decided quite a while ago, just before lockdown, to put a small presentation together. And then I started getting asked questions about, well, how do I fit an amateur radio piece of equipment in an electric car? So towards the end, there will be a bit of it relating to it, because I think quite a few of us go mobile. I know I do myself. So for that reason, this is where it starts. So I started off with the history of it. So it covers a bit of the history. The first electric cars, surprisingly, go back to Charles Anderson in the 1830s. A lot of people don't know that, and they didn't use rechargeable batteries. It was a container underneath the seat where the driver sat, and it was like a copper tin with plates in, and they poured acid into it, and that's how it formed the electric. You can imagine the dangers that were involved with this. They were a bit limited by time that the solution actually worked, and it was dangerous. So electric cars haven't just come to the light. They're not something that's modern day. That was one of the things that a lot of people say it's a modern day thing. So the history, basically, the first battery powered, and we're talking batteries, not the early lead acid in a tank, goes back to 1881. Then obviously we have electric charging points started coming in, and as you can see from the top right hand picture, it was a bit of a mess, very dangerous. Health and safety didn't exist then. But taxis started coming out in 1899, and underneath the taxi was the battery. But taxis were great because they got around town. There's no horses, you know, to feed or anything. They just kept going. And the technology itself was quite rapid. The first vehicle to exceed 100 kilometers an hour was actually an electric car. So the French were really developing this and moving on with it. But petrol came out, didn't it? And as petrol came out, it took over. But they still pushed it. They modernised, if you can call it modernised, the charging points. And with the charging points, this one was being, it's actually, this is a copy of the poster from PSA, the company that was selling these electric cars. And yeah, I wouldn't like myself to be the person that actually plugged that in and cranked the voltage up. There is a copy of this in a museum down at Coventry, and all them connections are live. So when she's touching things, there's a lot of live stuff there. It's quite dangerous. So as you can see, it's been going on quite a while. That's the top left-hand picture is actually a reproduction of one of the electric cars. It was made, but owing to health and safety, they have to put car batteries in. You can see how you can link car batteries, as we all know, and you can make up quite a bit of current, enough to actually make it go. Again, a bit like the car, they were just known as the horseless carriage, but very quiet. People didn't like them for the simple fact they were too quiet. People were getting knocked down, unlike the petrol and the diesel. You could hear them coming. With electric cars, you couldn't. So it did get a bit of a poor following from day one with the electric vehicle. So they started pushing the adverts. This is one of the adverts for the aristocrats. Yeah, to show that the car itself was actually very safe, very stylish, and very modern. So it's been going around quite a while. Taxis came into London in the 1913s because of the pollution hazard. This is one of the first taxis to come in. You can see the batteries under the bonnet. They were trying to compete against the petrol and the diesel, the petrol cars. And the petrol cars were very noisy, very cumbersome. They kept breaking down, whereas the electric car was fairly, I would say fairly robust compared to the actual petrol car, apart from the fact you had to charge it up every single night because the range wasn't very well. But electric cars have been around for a number of years, and a lot of people don't realise it. But when you think back to the milk floats that used to rattle around the streets early hours of the morning, delivery vans, taxis, they were all powered by DC, which is the old car battery that we know now. But they had a problem. One of the major problems was if you put your foot on the accelerator, the car or van, milk float, would move. The problem you had was, as you increased the load on the actual vehicle, you had to push the accelerator further down, which made taxis very uncomfortable because as taxis, people get in and out of taxis, the driver would find it a problem actually judging when the car needed to move. So sometimes it would move off with a bit of a jolt, making it a very uncomfortable ride. Milk floats, the problem they had was they used a lot of power to start off because the milk float was fully loaded and it would actually then use the power early on. And the milkman had to hope there was enough power for when he got back with his empty milk float. Delivery vans, the range was only about 30 or 40 miles. So you had to make sure that the driver only had a very short distance. And we all know DC is what powers motors. So therefore, there was no real options they could do with it. I think we all remember the old DC with the big battery underneath. You can see it in the underneath the milk itself. And that went right across the bottom. And it took about 10 hours to charge that battery. It was a huge one made by Exide, but it did the job. It was functional because nobody wanted petrol or diesels driving around at 4 a.m. in the morning, waking everybody up from sleep. So just a bit of a down memory lane with the old milk floats. Yeah. So we'll just go moving forward with a bit of the history. General Motors then decided, right, electric cars need to come in. Everybody started thinking around about the 1995, 1996 that they need to start moving forward. So the environmental issue is not something that is only just come in. I started getting involved with these around about the year 2000. So as you can see, we've got General Motors came in 1996, Chevrolet came in 1997, Honda. So there's some quite good ones. The Toyota, Tesla, they came in around about 2008. They're a late entry. Everybody rates Teslas as the best, only pure and simple. They have a bigger battery than everybody else. Nissan Leaf, BMW, they've all come into it. So every manufacturer, I think, now is actually covering the electric car because it is the way forward. There is no way back. You can have an old car modified, gives you an idea of what it takes to modify it. We've got quite a bank of batteries underneath the bonnet. It's an old Mini. I wouldn't like to tell you the price that it costs you to modify an old car, but to say you can buy a new car cheaper. I'll put it like that. The plastic perspex covers put on top in order to safeguard any issues. The big black box bolted to the bulkhead is an inverter, and all the other electrics are in there. So yeah, if you've got an old car, don't think it's scrap because you haven't got a battery in there. You've actually got one that can be converted. There's a number of companies do it, but like I say, unless you've got an absolute prestige vintage car, it's not really advisable. Then somebody come up with the idea of the hybrids, and they've all been petrol hybrids, which means partly it's run on battery, partly it's run on the electric. Peugeot fetched out the very first diesel hybrid in 2011. Now, the very first diesel hybrid was a big flop. I work for the company, I don't mind saying, because what happens with diesels is diesels rely on a lot of high mileage in order to keep all the injectors clean, the fuel system clean. A diesel that just ticks over just clogs up and just destroys the engine. And what was happening with these was they were just ticking over to charge the battery. Then the minute that the battery is fully charged, the diesel engine would cut off and it would then just carry on. So in effect, you never really, what we call, blow the engine out and get all the soot out of it. So it just destroyed engines left, right and centre, which did create a major problem. That's why they stopped doing them. I'll warn you about this because whenever you see one second hand, unless you know the history of it, it's it can be a dangerous thing to buy the hybrids. Another reason for mentioning it is nowadays you will not usually find a diesel hybrid because of all these problems they had. They've realised now that the general public car does not really work, so you'll only find petrol hybrids. Hybrid cars, they were very short on mileage. This gives you a picture of what's actually inside a hybrid car. Where the back axle is no spare wheel. Where the spare wheel fits is the actual battery itself. Underneath the battery is the motor with the 3 wires, which is connected to the drive shafts. And you've also got a control unit. The control unit actually takes the 400 volts out of the battery and converts it and puts it into 3-phase. So these motors work on 3-phase. I'll cover why 3-phase in a minute. So what you had to do was basically put a massive amount of power into a very small battery. This is where lithium ion and other battery sources come in, because they give a very, very big punch, but they don't last for very long. So whereas the milk float could last all evening, this usually lasted for about 30 mile. After 30 mile, it was flat and the diesel engine kicked in. So you start to understand and appreciate a little bit why it is that this happens. That's a top view of the battery. Battery's up on top, and we've got the control unit, and we've got the spare wheel, which you don't have a spare wheel, so it's actually a pump. All the orange cables are what you stay away from. The reason I say this is if ever you're going mobile and you decide to put a rig into your car or whatever you want to put into your car, stay away from the big thick cables. These big thick cables, no matter what the manufacturer is, whether it be Volvo, Renault, Peugeot, BMW, they're running on average 400 volts. Now, 400 volts, as you can appreciate, it'll give you a very, very nasty kick. But people sometimes see big, thick cables and think, that's carrying a lot of power, a lot of amperage. I can put a big linear on that, yeah. So, but that is where the spare wheel goes. So when you're buying a hybrid, that is what you've got. Now, that weighs close on to about 1/4 of a ton. So one of the myths that came up was, well, I don't seem to get much fuel economy out of my hybrid car when it's running on petrol. The reason is because you've got a standard car, whether it be petrol or diesel, which does the standard fuel economy, 38, 40, 50 miles per gallon, whatever it does. But then it's like towing a little trailer around with you. You've got a quarter of a ton in the boot. So straight away, if you get a car and start towing a trailer, your fuel economy is going to be going down. So when people were saying, well, the fuel economy on a hybrid is nowhere near what mine is, they weren't taking into consideration the quarter of a ton sat in the boot. All this was all coupled together by computers, because the computers then run in tangent with each other, because what you had to have was you had to have a computer that controlled the engine underneath the bonnet, which was the standard engine, but then you had a computer that controlled the electric motor, but then the two of them had to work together so the car knew when to turn off which motor at what particular time. And just in case anyone wonders what I do, I specialize in the field of these computers and how they operate and how they actually switch things on and off. The data networking and all that sort of thing. But you can imagine if you've got 110 brake horsepower under the bonnet and you've 80 to 90 brake horsepower in the electric motor, yeah, you can do some decent speeds. But there isn't, these two actually linked together, so the car suddenly can become a four-wheel drive, and you've got 200 brake horsepower, and some of them now are getting up towards 400 brake horsepower. So when you're buying a hybrid or an electric car, you have to be aware of the fact that these things are very, very powerful compared to the old milk floats and delivery vans. Obviously, the more power you use, the quicker the battery goes flat, but you've got a lot of power. So we've taken a big leap forward from how it was in the 1970s and 1980s to suddenly the 1990s and 2000. There was a massive leap in technology. And that's because all the manufacturers just sat there and decided rather than bring things out in bits and pieces, let's just work on it and bring it out in one go. With all this technology comes a bit of a problem. If we look at the diagram, we've got blue pipes. The brown pipe is actually the wires carrying the power from the front to the back, the electric. But underneath is actually the coolant pipes. The electric motor, the battery, do get hot because as you go uphill, it uses charge, but as you go downhill, it puts charge back into the batteries. And we all know when we're charging a handheld, the actual handheld battery can get quite warm. So it's exactly the same. So for that reason, the rear end is actually connected to the front end via coolant pipes. I mention this because if you do decide to put rigs into the car and you do decide to sit there mobile and you think the battery's going flat a bit, I'll start the engine up. Anybody sat in the back seat will soon start getting a heating feeling to the back, yeah, because your back seat is actually underneath that is the battery. So they do get very warm on the back seat if you just sat stationary because it's relying on air going underneath. So it's just something that people don't realise that you've got all this. My concern is speed humps. Underneath the car is all these wires and cables. If you hit a speed hump at the wrong speed and you do some damage, who's going to be liable? The council for speed humps being, you know, not kept the same or raised too high, or the driver for because they're driving too fast. But there can be a lot of damage done underneath. Yeah. If we have a look at the thing, you can see the motor, electric motor on the back, 110 horsepower. We've got 110 horsepower normal standard engine on the front, so that's 220 horsepower this particular car will perform with. And we've also got the battery at 13.2 kilowatt hours. So it does depend on the car and everything else as to what exactly happens with these. Yeah. On an electric vehicle, when you lift the bonnet, that's what it looks like underneath. So there's nothing to check, there's nothing to see. But we do have people that pass cables through bulkheads and then try and connect things to batteries and alternators to get charge for anything from an audio amplifier to a big linear for, dare I say it, CB. We have had people trying to connect 200-watt linears and coming in and saying, how do I connect this? But as you can see, every single cable under there is orange, so you cannot connect to that. Underneath the bonnet is pure 400 volts. That's all there is. But what you have to be careful of, and what a lot of people don't understand, is this is where it starts getting a little bit dangerous. It's not just 400 volts DC. In order to make the motor more efficient, and if you remember at the beginning, I was saying that when you put your foot on the actual accelerator, it takes a time sometimes for it to respond, depending on the weight. The way we've got around this is to do it at 400 volts, 3-phase AC. So you've got inverters that convert the 400 volts DC into 400 volts AC. So you have actually got, sorry about that, you have actually got 400 volts AC floating around in the car. So this is where it starts to get a little bit dangerous. If we have a look at the number 3 on the picture, up at the top end, we've got 3 orange wires next to a small gap, and then 3 more orange wires. The reason you've got that is that's 3 400 volt wires coming into the DC, coming into the inverter, and 3 400 volt AC wires coming out of the inverter. Number 3 is the inverter that converts it. Number 2 is the control module. Number 1 is the radiator to keep it all cool. And number 4 is the pump that actually pumps the coolant around the system. So underneath your bonnet is very, very simple. Very, very easy, very efficient, but yeah, there's not a lot for people to play with and not a lot for you to connect with if you're a radio ham or wanted to do anything else. This just gives you a diagram of what actually happens. The green are the power units. We've got at the back, we've got the green fuel tank because it's a petrol car. We've also got power going from the petrol tank up to the actual engine. So it takes fuel, it takes it up to the engine, that produces the power, it goes down the drive shafts and it moves. But also we've got batteries under the back seats. That takes 400 volts up to the electric motor, which is up at the front on this particular model. So you've then got an electric motor that can also power. So the clutch can disengage between the engine and the electric motor. So the problem with that is it's got to disengage while you're driving and switch between petrol and electric. And again, that's where the electrics come in. You have no control over this and you have no say over it. Computers do it. The average electric car has somewhere in the region of 24 computers controlling everything. So when you do install something extra into an electric car, one thing you've got to be careful of is where you connect. Because if you connect to the wrong thing and it messes around with the data wires or takes a little bit of the feed or the earth, because they're very critical, these 0.3 of a volt drop can actually throw something out. You know, all sorts of faults and they just won't move. They don't come up with the engine warning light on the actual dash. They just don't move. They just stop dead. The motor on the back, just in case you're wondering what it looks like, that's what it looks like. The grey bit in the middle is the actual motor. The blue bits are the mounts, and the actual chassis or the rear cross member just bolts straight onto the bodywork. It's a fairly generic thing that goes through all. If you look at the back of a BMW, a Volkswagen, an Audi, Peugeot, Citroen, they're all the same. There's one company in Morocco that makes these for all these manufacturers. So it's a fairly generic thing that is made. But it is quite a complex thing. And like I say, you're getting on for, between that and the battery, there's a 1/4 of a ton. So it's not something you can repair at home, but it gives you an idea of what's underneath there. We have actually had a car in the garage that had the motor banged. They'd gone off-roading a little bit and managed to somehow get a boulder into the motor and damage the casing. So they're not indestructible by no means. Anybody ever wonder what a traction battery looks like? That's what it looks like. Sits under the seat. When you go underneath the car, it's covered by a metal tray, so you'd never actually see it. And the whole thing is controlled in the middle. You see the little brown bit? That is actually a microprocessor that controls the batteries. One bank on the left and one bank on the right. The bit that goes in the middle, you think, well, why does it? That's actually the exhaust. The exhaust runs down the middle of the car, just the same as any other standard car. It's just this is basically you've lost half a fuel tank. That's how they've done it. You've lost half a fuel tank to do that. Gives us a bit of a view of the component layout as we move now on to electric cars, full electric. What you have to remember is up to 2015, you're going to be able to buy petrol, diesel, electric or hybrid From 2015, they're going to be stopping the diesel, so you'll only be able to buy petrol, hybrid or electric. I think it's from 2030 is the date at the moment. You'll only be able to buy electric. So it's one of them. It's handy to know what's in the car and what's underneath. People say, well, what mileage will it do? How far will it go? Basically, how big is the car? Because the floor of an electric car is the battery. So the bigger the floor, the further it'll go. If you look at the area of a Tesla, the actual area that the floor pan covers, which is where the seats go, is much bigger than most cars. So therefore, the car can go a lot further. But with the bigger battery comes more expense. Hence the reason why a Tesla is so expensive. How it produces everything is pretty much the same. The technology's there. It's just their battery is a lot bigger. Hence the car is a lot heavier. And for that reason, yeah, I wouldn't say it's a better car, just more expensive. Average ramp in a garage will lift about 3 ton to 3.5 ton in weight. A Tesla car weighs just short of 4 ton. So if anybody buys a Tesla and goes into somewhere to have a tyre change, like for instance, one of our national ones like QuickFit, the ramps won't lift it. It's as simple as that. Or they do lift it, but they strain. One day somebody will get stuck on one. Yeah. But again, if we have a look, we got the battery cooling hoses. Again, that's critical. Thing to be careful of there is they do run down the side of the cars. If anybody's mounting aerials and things like that and start drilling holes, if you drill through one of them, yeah, very expensive mistake to make. Charging cables go direct into the battery. They don't go via anything else. There are ECUs at the back that control the charge. We will cover a little bit on the charging after, just so people have got an idea. When they go into a showroom, they know what it is they're going to be buying. You got the onboard charger. This onboard charger, which is at the front of the car, actually controls the car being charged from the mains or being charged whilst on the road. Yeah. The vehicle control unit, which is just next to the onboard charger, that is what replaces the old engine ECU, the old computer. It still has one of them. It still controls everything. So, yeah. But it just gives you an idea of what's underneath there, what exactly is going on. Yeah. Give you a better idea of how the traction battery is located. We've seen lots of pictures, as we've seen here, on the actual car looking from on top, but I thought I'd show you a picture from underneath. There are 2 versions of the battery that's made. At the moment, they're made in China, 11.8 kilowatt hour and 13.2 kilowatt hour. There are factories now coming up and being made to compete with the Chinese, which will bring the price of a battery down. If anybody's wondering the price of a battery, we do hear rumours. The hybrid batteries are averaging between £5,000 and £8,000, depending on the size, and a full electric one is between £12,000 and £15,000 just for the battery. Then they have to be fitted. So that's what one looks like. But when we look at a battery and we pick up a car battery, most people have seen a car battery, you tend to think of it as one big cell. It's 6 cells inside a big battery case. We've got the metal covers off the top one. The top cover's been removed so you can see. We've got a module. Each module contains a number of cells. Each cell contains 4 volts. And they all add up to make the 400 volts. 18 standard modules. And so it all adds up. But the problem is, when you discharge a battery and it goes flat, you tend to think that's it, it's flat. But as we all know, we put a voltmeter across a battery, and even though it might not be strong enough to actually work anything, we know there's still a few volts left in the system. When a hybrid or an electric car battery goes flat, what you have to bear in mind is it's exactly the same. Just because it won't power the system up, the gauge shows that it's flat, there's still over 200 volts in the system. So even though the battery is showing that it's flat on the car, you have to remember you're still working with a 200 volt system. So that means on the DC side, there's 200 volts, and on the AC side, through the inverter, there's 200 volts AC. So it is worth remembering all this for safety. That just gives you some specifications. LG Chemical are the ones that actually make all the batteries at the moment. There are other manufacturers. And you can see 216 cells. Each cell has 3.7 volts in, and it's rated at 400 volts. The battery itself weighs well over a quarter of a ton. You have to use an engine lift basically to lift it. It's that heavy. We have tried to lift it with 6 lads, and we just about got it off the ground, just out of curiosity to see how it was. But they are monstrous things, and if you damage them, you will be paying for it. If they are guaranteed up to 10 years, but if they're damaged in any way, shape, or form, no guarantee. And they are inspected closely to make sure that they're not damaged, because they just don't want to pay for something. I don't think that has hit a speed hump. So it gives you an idea what's in there. I said the battery itself covers the actual floor pan. This is just a typical little runabout, as they say. Yeah, it goes underneath the floor, so you're actually sat on top of the battery. So just bear it in mind. I've had one case so far where somebody actually fitted a audio amplifier under the back seat of the car, drilled through the floor in order to mount the bracket for the audio amplifier, and drilled straight into the battery. Very expensive, because it cost them 11,000 quid for a new battery. So yeah, just be aware of that when you're mounting things on the floor. Your battery's underneath there, and there's very, very little clearance. You've only got somewhere in the region of about 3 millimeters between the battery and the floor. So you can't really mount anything under your seats. I know in my own car, I have an FT100, the head is on the dash, but underneath the passenger seat is the actual unit, and the bracket to stop it floating around is drilled through the floor, and everything, it's all mounted. I couldn't do that with an electric car. So even though we are an electric car talk, it does relate a little bit to the mounting of things, yeah. Gives you a better idea. That's actually a photograph of an electric car with the bodywork taken off and everything. So you can see in the middle is where your 2 seats would be, passenger seat, driver's seat, and in the back is where the back seat is. So you've got very little room there, especially when it's only 2-3 millimeters to the actual floor itself. The bit in the middle is where the rear passengers put their feet. So yeah, you start to appreciate some of the problems you have. Not only with driving over speed humps or rough ground, you've got to make sure you stay well clear of that. And some of these cars are very low nowadays, but also from my amateur radio perspective, it's mounting stuff. You'll be pleased to know that these things are so well shielded from RF. I've done up to 2,500 watts and not interfere with anything on the car at all. So they are quite shielded. I've even thrown the SWR out through a tuner up to about 3.2 at 2,500 watts, and still no interference. So you don't have to worry about that aspect of it. All the electrics do not interfere with amateur radio. It's your mounting of your equipment that's the problem. Yeah. I'll just reiterate about do not touch anything with orange cables. These thick orange cables, they are carrying the high voltage. And if anybody does get an electric car and lift the bonnet just to top up the washer buckle, you'll notice, I think about 70% of it is orange electric cables. So be very aware of that. Charging. Now, one thing that we get a lot of questions. People are a bit stuck on the charging point. In this particular country, we only have one charging system. It's called the Type 2, and it's in Europe as well, but others like America have other charging systems, but the Type 2 is the most popular. You've got AC fast charge or DC rapid charge. AC fast charge is the sort that the lady's doing, which is plugging into your house. People think they have to have the drive dug up and they have to have all sorts done to get these charge points in, because they're carrying high currents and things like that. The AC fast charge is 13 amps. That's all it is. So they don't have to have anything done. The way it's normally done is it's mounted by an electric company, and that particular fast charger there, the AC fast charger, is about £300 installed. So it's not expensive. The rules are, you can see the cable running along the ground. The cable must not be anywhere where the public can trip over it. They're not bothered about you. So basically, if you can't have it on your property, you can't have it. So I live where it's a country lane and there is no no way to have one of them. So I can't have an electric car unless I come up with something. The car has to be parked a few hundred yards away from the house, and I can't have a charge point there. So that's something to bear in mind when you're buying an electric or a plug-in hybrid, where the charge point goes. We do have people that buy cars and then try and work out where the charge point goes and find they can't have one. The only way you can charge your car then is to go down to Tesco's or Morrison's or supermarket and charge it there, and then bring it home. So there is also the domestic 13 amp plug that actually just plugs into the wall. The difference is the AC charger will charge it in about 6 hours. The 13 amp plug-in socket will charge it in about 8 hours. So there's a couple of hours extra for charging, but it is an alternative. You can't have a charge point, but you can, you know, we have one customer that we've had in that actually charges it up at work, and while she's at work, she plugs it into the wall in the office and runs the lead out of the window and plugs it in the car. So it's a bit of a weird way of doing it. It says down at the bottom, disadvantage 30 hours to fully charge. I've never known a car to fully charge from flat in 30 hours. The average time is 8 hours. It does tell you on the display how long it takes to actually charge. So, yeah, so the charging is one thing that has to be really taken into account when you're buying a car. There's various different sockets. Fast charging, we've got the type 2 socket, as I've already explained. It's easier to plug in. Depending on what the charger does, the actual charging unit that's in the car park or wherever it is, it can be a 3 kilowatt or a 7 kilowatts. Obviously 7 kilowatt charges it twice as fast, but a 3 kilowatt, it'll take about an hour and a half to charge your car. There's several, I'll get that right, yeah, private and different companies that own these charging points. This is something to be very aware of. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in this country, the government, instead of saying, right, we'll do the charging circuits for everywhere, and then so everybody can just charge the car, they put it out to tender. And what happened was 7 companies applied and 7 companies got it. So in order for you to charge your car, you either have to pay with your debit card, or credit card, which can come at a bit of a premium, or you can buy one of their loyalty cards, which gives you a discount. The problem is, if you go from like northwest of England to the south of England and it's another company, your loyalty card won't work there. So unless you've got another form of payment, you can't actually charge your car, which can cause a bit of a problem. So be aware of this. If you're doing journeys, you've got to make sure that you can charge your car wherever you go. Average distance on a car is between 200 and 250 miles. Well, from here, from mid-centre of England to the south of England is about 200, 250 miles. So you need a full charge to get back. So if you can't, you're in trouble, basically. So it's easy to carry around the charging lead in the vehicle, but people do forget to leave them at home, unfortunately. This just gives you an idea of some of the charging sockets that are out there. We've got the Japanese charging socket at the top, type 1. But as you can see in the bottom picture, they do an adapter, so all is not lost. There's only about 3 or 4 adapters, and if you do get the 3 or 4 adapters, you can actually charge anything, anywhere. You just got the problem of making sure you can pay for it, that's all. A lot of going over to this now, where it's apps on the phones, very easy to use. But again, you got to make sure you're with the company that can do it. And yeah, you can see halfway up the actual charge point is the contactless payment. How it works is you plug your car in, you then make a payment. So you don't pay after you've charged it, you pay before. A bit like using petrol pumps. It then locks the car in place, so nobody can unplug it until you get there and you unlock the car. And it just charges it. It charges you for the amount of electric it took to charge it, or the amount of electric it took whilst it was plugged in. So it's just something to bear in mind. We do get some fancy charging stations, which have every kind of socket that there is. There's only 3 in this country. The middle one is the fast charge. The fast charge more or less dumps 400 volts into your battery in about 8 minutes. when we see, if anyone's seen the advert on the TV where I think it's Esso are doing an all-electric charging station to replace a petrol station, this is what they're using. So when you pull up, it'll charge your car in about 10 minutes. If anybody's noticed, there's a lot of petrol stations now, service stations have got Costco's and Subways actually attached to them. The whole idea is you pull up, you plug in, you go and have a brew, a sandwich, you come out and your car's fully charged. So it allows you to carry on your journey and keep going and keep going and keep going. What you have to bear in mind is the computers are designed, as we all know, when we're doing charging up portable radios. If we use a fast charger, the batteries get absolutely red hot. So you need to let them cool down a little bit. Because of this fact and the battery could be damaged, what happens is when you've done 3 fast charges, the car will only do a slow charge. So even if you plug it into the middle port, the yellow one, which is the fast charger, it will only actually charge at a slow rate. So on the 4th time, you might only get a 20% rate. So that means you probably only get about, what, 50 miles down the road, and then you have to plug it into another fast charger. Then you get another 3 fast charges, and you need a slow charger. So it's nothing to do with anything other than protecting the batteries and keeping the life of each battery working as long as it possibly can. Little picture there, if we look at the CCS, which is the fast charger, the 2 bottom sockets is what actually charges the battery at a very, very fast rate. Now, if you're only doing short mileage and you're going to buy an electric car, if you look at the top port, that is usually what comes with it. You have to make sure you have the bottom 2 connectors on the actual car. If you buy a car and it hasn't got that, be aware the car cannot be upgraded. You'd have to get rid of the car and buy one. So it's like I do a lot of mileage. So I had to make sure that when I'm using one of these electric cars from work, I actually have the fast charge ports. If I use one without the fast charge ports, if I do a big trip up to Scotland, I've got to literally park the car up overnight and charge it overnight. Otherwise, it just won't move. Yeah. And again, it says there about 80% of the charge on the fast charge to protect the batteries, but it'll still get you a few hundred miles. So you can get around. Disadvantages down at the bottom, several private companies control the charge points. Yeah, so it can be horrendous to actually pay for it in this country. So when you plug it in, it basically, you've got lights on that let you know it's charging, they let you know there's a fault there, and everything. It is fairly waterproof. The whole thing is insulated from everywhere else. So if you're washing the car, pressure washing it or anything like that, you don't need to worry. You're not going to get an electric shock. It's all designed around the actual voltage going one way. There's diodes and everything, so the terminals that you can see, and you'll see little metal terminals, they're all dead because the diodes only go one way. And the diodes are designed that if voltage tries to travel the other way and the diode fails, basically the diode explodes to prevent anything. The problem with that is, if that happens, you pull up at a service station, there's been a fault and the diode's blown, you can't charge your car because it's a physical break then. So you plug it in and it just flashes red to say there's no voltage going anywhere. So they do have the drawbacks. When they break, they are designed not to move. With a petrol car or a diesel car, if something goes faulty, I think we've all been stuck behind the car that's chugging out black smoke out of the back of the car because it's faulty. Electric cars and hybrids don't work like that. When something goes wrong, they stop dead. Because potentially you could have 400 volts AC going around the actual chassis of the car. With that in mind, there are precautions. Every single owner's manual has this. You've got the hybrid, 2-wheel drive. It's possible to lift the front wheels because usually the front wheel drive, but you can't lift the rear wheels. You can put it on a trailer, but you can't tow it. The reason behind this is because whilst the motor is used as a motor, once you're freewheeling, it's used as a generator. If you had an electrical fault, an electrical wire shorted out because you've gone over a speed hump, the problem you've got is you could potentially, by towing a car, have 400 volts going into the chassis or into a defective battery that's discharging. And the minute someone touches a door handle to open it, you get an electric shock. So this is very much safety. The advice from the fire brigade is if your car breaks down, leave it and get the experts. Don't even lift the bonnet. The reason I say that is the electric car catches fire, they burn well. Fire brigade won't even come out to them. So that's another story for another time. When cars do go faulty and you go into the workshop, don't expect them to be repaired the same as a normal car. Because of the 400 volts, there's only people that are authorised to actually go into the working area. There's only people that are qualified, allowed to go within the working area, and the car is disabled and shut down, and it's left to power down for 2 hours. So if you have a fault with an electric car or a hybrid car and you go into a workshop, the first thing we'll do is go out there with a meter and make sure it's safe, i.e. no electric going through the bodywork. Once they've done that, they'll shut the car down, and then nobody will go near the car for 2 hours. So in the old days, when your car used to break down, it used to get towed in on the EAA, the RAC, or a breakdown company, and they'd say, yeah, just take a seat and I'll get a mechanic to have a look at it. It's, yeah, we'll organise you going home, and you might not see your car for days while it's being sorted. So just something to bring to your attention, because some people I've heard say, well, I took my car in, it's only had a warning light on the dash and I saw it a week later. So, yeah. Gives you some of the idea what's out there at the moment. We're talking about power. The saloon, you've got the plug-in hybrid, the saloon, 225 horsepower combination between the battery and the actual engine. And if you look at the bottom one, the SUV, 300 brake horsepower, 300 horsepower. That's a lot of power. I brought this because some people are saying, like, it's absolutely awesome, the power in it, and they don't realize how fast they can go. I've seen so many knocks and bumps because people are accelerated so fast, and the standard car in front can't accelerate as quick as one of these, and it's literally, they go straight up the back end of the car in front. Yeah, but if you actually do a lot of really heavy motoring, must put your foot right down on the accelerator, you can see the range is only about 30 miles. So it depends what you want to do. I sooner drive comfortably, but just be aware of that. We talked about computers. That just gives you an idea. When we design the computers on a car, we don't look at a picture of a car. This is the architecture of how we design it, and what does what. So it gives you an idea of how the computer works. We have now started putting into the owner's manuals that amateur radio equipment can be used up to the power of 100 watts. That is now in the owner's manuals on most manufacturers. We've tested up to 250 watts, but we're putting 100 because that's what the standard equipment does. If you put a linear in there, then obviously it's on your own head. But you will find that now in owner's manuals. But anybody who wants to know about the architecture, how computers work, how they're all linking together, how the CAN networks work, and everything else, that just gives you a bit of an overlay. It's a little bit complex to go through on this particular one, but you never know, you may want another talk if you want to get a bit more in depth with that. Yeah. Most of them use a system called FlexRay, if nobody's ever heard of it. High Speed 2, FlexRay. I was on the development of this, but you can see you can see how everything is linked to everything else. The reason behind that is if something goes wrong and we've got 400 volts we're playing with, it's all like daisy chain. So once you break that daisy chain, the system shuts down, and that's how it's designed, as a pure safety thing. But yeah, that is just your electric car. Gives you an idea of what controls the actual motor and the battery. So yeah, and it brings you back to the same old thing. Do you buy or do you convert? If you look at the front, you can actually see the silver bit barrel at the front is actually the electric motor. So it depends how much you love your car. That's what it boils down to. But it shows you can fit it into a Mini. This particular Mini, the picture we saw at the beginning, had the electric motors under the bonnet of the electric of the Mini, and it had a motor in the boot. This one is reverse. The electric battery is in the actual boot and the motor is under the bonnet. So just for clarity, they've taken the bonnet off so you can see. Yeah. So, and that finishes that. So do we have any questions?
Great stuff, Chris. Let me just shut that down and
get rid of that. Let's see if I can get my picture back up. Yeah. There you go. For some reason it was video camera off.
Oh.
Well, while Chris is doing that, let me just say thank you, Chris, first of all, for fascinating talk. I'm sure people have got loads of questions, and loads of people now massively reconsidering, do I go and get an electric car now after that talk, Chris? But who's got a question to Chris first of all? So I've got Russell with his hand up. Can you still hear us, Chris?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, go on, Russell.
So, Chris, reading between the lines of your presentation there, I get the idea that you don't really like electric cars. Would that be a fair assessment?
I have no problem at all with electric cars. Where I have a problem with is, if you look at it, the petrol, diesel, the way the environment is, we're going to have to go down the route of electric cars. There's no two ways about that. I fully understand that. Where we have the problem is, to be perfectly frank, it's the infrastructure for charging.
Absolutely.
That's where the problem lies. Now, there are some countries that are playing around with induction charging at the moment, and what they've done is they've put on a stretch of like test circuit induction coils into the ground. So as you drive along, you're actually charging the car as you drive. The whole idea of that is, if it works, you would have, say, the slow lane of a motorway or a dual carriageway that would actually be charging the car as you drove. But the problem you have then is, how do you charge the customer? You'd have to have some kind of metering device.
Oops.
Disappeared, Chris.
Oh dear.
We've lost Chris.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put the audio on pause while we wait for. Sorry, put the recording on pause. We'll wait for Chris to come back. Okay, everyone, we've got Chris back in again, so welcome back, Chris. Who would like to go now with a question to Chris to try and answer? Who wants to go first? Yeah, go on, John, JMB.
Yeah. Question, Chris. They're absolutely jam full of electronic components and connectors.
Yes.
What's the MTBF?
The MTBF?
Mean time between failure.
I don't know. the life.
You know, these things are calculable.
Yeah, the life of a connector.
Doing them on military avionics.
Yeah, with the connectors on these electronic and hybrid cars, the life expectancy is 10 operations. So on the 10th time the plug is removed, it's thrown away, and a new plug's fitted.
Surely that's not the charge port, though.
No, not the charge port. It's everything else. So if a car comes in, and let's just say it's got a fault with the DC to DC charger or the DC to DC inverter or whatever, if that's been moved 10 times, it's thrown away. That cable, that multi-plug. Yeah. All the connectors in the high voltage only have, and this is not something that you look at it and you actually think, oh, that looks okay. On the worksheets and everything, it is recorded that plug's been removed and it's been refitted. So after 10 times, it's thrown. Yeah, and a new one's fitted. Now, my question that's been put out there to the manufacturers is, who pays for that? If your car comes in and it breaks down and it comes in for a repair or maintenance, and it's under warranty, it's been removed 6 times, the final 4 times it's out of warranty, does that mean that you have to pay for it? These leads are not cheap. These cables and these multi-plugs and these connectors are not cheap. And that is the question we are all asking in the motor industry. It's okay while it's in warranty, and you're saying a 10-year warranty on the battery. What happens when it's out of warranty? To give you an example, if we're testing the high voltage from the DC to the AC inverter, we unplug the multi-plug, we test it, plug it back in, unplug the other end, test it, plug it back in, unplug one end, check something else. So them connectors have been unplugged just in one operation 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
So we're saving the planet from petrol, but ruining the planet with all the stuff we're throwing away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were discussing this earlier, and the phrase greenwash comes out very, very, very strongly. There's no sort of proper consideration of the overall climatic effect of these
where
things.
the problem
All the infrastructure
lies,
costs.
this is from the motor industry where I see it. It's been rushed through. That's why we don't have an infrastructure in place at the moment, because what's happened is environmentalists want it, fair enough. We understand the planet's on the doom, or whatever you want to call it, you know, and we all understand this. But to suddenly rush something out without even thinking about the consequences or what's happening, it's like, for instance, if you take every single electric car that's needed for this country, there isn't enough power in the power stations to produce the electricity to charge them cars. So what happens? They're already putting it out to tender for nuclear power stations to be built, which we all know they're better than what they used to be. But is that the solution, or isn't it? So there's a knock-on effect, and it seems like, from my point of view, working within the industry, that it's been rushed through without really thinking about it. And what I find scary is with the petrol crisis we've just had, sales of electric cars are shooting up through the roof, because people seem to think that if I'm an electric car, I'm not going to face the petrol pumps, which is all well and good. But we do have people coming in, buying an electric car, and they're coming back and saying, I can't charge it. They won't fit me one because they say the cable has to run across the public footpath. So this is the reason that this talk came in, because people are a bit blind to what's happening because it's not discussed. All you see is the adverts. These electric cars look absolutely superb. And when you go into any garage, the salesman, because he gets commission on the car, he's not going to ask you, right, where can you charge?
Tell me all about it.
Yeah. and unfortunately,
Chris, you're correct that it has been rushed through in this country, but that's generally due to, I would suggest, government incompetence. Because I work in another country, which is Denmark, and they are flush with chargers everywhere.
Yeah.
And you know, driving an electric car there is actually a pleasure. Not that I do, but I know people that do. And you know, literally, it is everywhere you go. There are multiple chargers. And most people live in apartments. They can't charge at home, but they will, you know, charge in the street or whatever.
If the infrastructure was in this country, I would have an electric car tomorrow. I think they
I
are the
agree
way
with you.
forward. I think they are the way
Same
forward.
here.
And I would have one, even though I can't have a charge point here, because I know that I would be able to charge it somewhere else. But the problem is we don't have the infrastructure. I have 4 supermarkets within a few miles.
We don't, but I'd suggest that's the problem of this government rather than the electric cars themselves.
Yeah, it is. There's no problem with the cars. The technology behind it has been going on for years now. And to be honest, when I look at, because I deal a lot with the technical side of it, and other garages get in touch with me with this problem, this, that, and the other. And I see very, very few faults with electrical charges, electric cars. We did have a bit of an issue. We had supply problems, which everybody did with was it California, where the Silicon Valley, where they had the big factory and they had problems with getting older stuff. And but that seems to have gone now. So there was some substandard parts out there on a lot of everything. But that seems to have gone by the board now, and everything's been sorted out there. And I'm finding electric cars are very, very reliable. And the beauty about them is it's the same as a computer. Anything changes, anything technology-wise, you just do a download and it takes care of it. We worked out a way to get an extra 8 or 9% out of a battery. Now, 8 or 9% doesn't sound very much, but a simple download put an extra 60 miles onto the range of a car. Simple as that. Now, you couldn't do that with a petrol or a diesel car.
Just take your foot off the throttle.
Well, yeah.
But you talk about cars are reliable. But my son has a Tesla S3, I think it is. Looks very nice, like a squash Jaguar.
Yeah.
But he had a total electrical failure on it, everything off. But unfortunately, he was on a hill. And he had to sit there with his foot on the brake till he could find somewhere to get a brick behind the car before he could get out of it. Now, that Tesla is bloody dangerous. There's no other word
on the other hand, I've got a mate who's got a Nissan Leaf and a Renault Zoe, which he's run for 10 years, and neither of them have had anything ever go wrong.
Yeah.
Tesla, but when it does,
Tesla are a bit of a problem.
In this case, it was fail dangerous.
Yeah.
Tesla for the designer to put in a handbrake. I mean, all the cars used to have a handbrake as an emergency brake that you could lock on if you had brake failure on the other brakes. So I can't see why Tesla have failed to put a handbrake system in it as well.
Yeah. Oh, at the moment,
they did.
At the moment, in this country, all the manufacturers, if you take Vauxhall, Renault, Peugeot, Citroën, if there's any sort of electrical failure, any sort of anything goes wrong, the handbrake is applied automatically. It's mechanical, and I've just froze. I don't know that I am doing or not. Nope, seems to be okay. So that's the way that it works. Our problem is, from working on them, is once that applies, you can't get the damn thing off, and we've got to lift the car to get it moving. Tesla are a law unto themselves, and that's why at the moment, that is exactly what you say is a safety issue. It's going through the American courts, and if the American safety regulator wins, it's going to cost Tesla billions. He will be absolutely devastated. Yeah. He's one of the richest men in the world. That will soon disappear if America wins. The reason Tesla are being taken to court is exactly for them sort of issues. There is another one that with Tesla, a lot of stuff goes through the multifunction display on the car. The problem
that was my next point.
Yeah, but on a lot of them, they go through the multifunction display. The problem with the Tesla multifunction display is when the temperature drops below -7, it freezes. So a lot of the functions can't be operated. Now, in a lot of countries, that isn't a major problem. But when you go into, I think, is it Canada? They have sub-zero temperatures quite often. Imagine going down the road and, you know, one of the things that happens is the power distribution to the computers, in order to get you the maximum distance, when your battery starts to go a little bit on the low side, the computer will shut certain things down in order to conserve energy to get you where you want to go. And if it starts shutting things down and you need to override it, you can do, but you can't do if it brings down the heater control and then suddenly you find your screen's frozen and you can't activate things. There's lots of problems with Teslas, and the Americans are the ones that are taken into court. So I'm watching this space with Tesla and see exactly what happens.
Yeah, another simple one: you can't get down my drive because you haven't got enough ground clearance.
Well,
and the multifunction display, again, in my book, is dangerous. You've got to take your eyes off the road to do anything to it.
Yeah,
that big screen is a load of rubbish.
Peugeot, the last Peugeot I went in had the same problems exactly. Even just to turn the heating on, you had to poke around on a touch screen.
Yeah, I'm a lover of certain things like everybody else is, but the touch screen is one thing I've never been a lover of.
I think they're damn dangerous in cars.
Yeah, but it came about because the public decided. Every now and again, the manufacturers do surveys to see.
I would take issue with you there, Chris. It wasn't the public decided; it was the manufacturers that decided.
Well, marketing.
The thing, no, it's not the public decided for the touchscreen. What the public decided was on the survey was they wanted it to be more futuristic. And somebody in some, I wouldn't say office or lab or development place, decided that a touchscreen would make it more futuristic. I don't think it does. I'm sorry, it doesn't. You can do different designs of dashes, switches, and this sort of thing that make it more futuristic.
Nice row of rockers.
Yeah, without having to go down the road into a touchscreen. And the touchscreen, to be perfectly honest, has more problems with it than soft mic. In a hot summer's day, and you've got the full sun belting down on it, on any manufacturer, the touchscreen starts shutting down. If you connect a Bluetooth phone and it doesn't work right, because what a lot of people don't know is a radio on a car is not actually an old-fashioned radio. It's a bit like our SDR. So you connect a Bluetooth phone, and at the moment, iPhone are having major problems with them. You're going down the road, and if you've got satellite navigation on, the iPhone sees the actual Bluetooth connection to the radio as an intrusion to the iPhone. It breaks the link. That then causes a glitch within the radio system, which causes that to blank out, and it causes what we call black screening. and the whole thing just shuts down. And then some manufacturers, the only way to get it back on is to turn the engine off and start it back up. So if you're driving through town and you're following your sat nav, the iPhone suddenly realizes that it thinks it's being hacked in some way, and your whole touchscreen just shuts down. And the only way for you to get it back on is to turn the car off and turn it back on. Now, we've been looking into this problem for quite a while now, and it's took us the best part of 3 months to find out it was nothing at all to do with a fault on the phone or a fault with the actual touchscreen system. What it was the phone's antivirus or malware or whatever it is, thinking that the touchscreen was trying to hack something out the phone. So it just shut it all down. Now, at the moment, there is no fix for it, because the actual fix belongs to the phone company, because they have to put the correct programming into the phone to stop that from happening. Now, Galaxy and iPhone have already responded to us saying that their fix is it's no longer compatible with your car. And that is there. So if you had an iPhone, latest one, or from iPhone 10 onwards, and you went in and said, it's doing this and it's causing it to blank, what they'll do, their answer is, well, it's not compatible with that car. That's why it's doing it. And you go into the manufacturer and you say, well, it's doing this, and how can I stop it? We would turn around and say, well, you can't stop it because it's the phone that's doing it. You need to go and see the phone company. So anybody who's got a phone that's causing what they call black screening, you're snookered. The only way you can stop it is to turn your Bluetooth off in the car. Now, I have exactly the same problem, and the way I get around it is I use an earpiece. I don't connect the Bluetooth to the car, and that stops the black screening because of this problem I know. And until one of the phone companies, now the two major ones we're having problems with at the moment are Galaxy and iPhone, because they don't want to help. As far as they're concerned, the technology in the car is so backward and so behind. It's not our problem. It's up to the manufacturers to catch up.
I query the need for any of this in a car anyway.
Well, yeah.
I've got a Nokia that I can ring up in case of emergency. I'm not even sure how Bluetooth works or what it does for me, but I don't see the need for it. Beyond, it keeps people in a job selling it.
Right. Anyone else got to? Let's not divert down that road, John. But, fun as it is. Anyone else got a question to Chris while we've got Chris? Let's take someone who hasn't asked one yet. I've got Gerald and then Roger.
Okay. Hi there, Chris. Great talk, actually. Very interested in these new cars. And one thing I wanted to ask is you've said a lot of high voltages floating around in the car. Yes. Does it have a suitable charging point for charging the leisure battery, which we can use to run the radio? And or is it just, and why are they doing it at 400 volts? It seems unnecessary.
At 400 volts, it's the only way you could get a smooth uptake of drive. That was the only way. And then it had to be 400 volts, 3-phase. We do a demonstration for people that are coming on the training courses about this. And what we do is we unplug, we take the master fuse out of the workshop. We have a special lead that we plug into a car and plug it into the workshop, start the car up, and the car powers the workshop. That's how much power there is. So that creates the smooth drive, not the jolts that there was in the beginning. So that's that reason. There is an auxiliary battery under the bonnet, a normal 12-volt battery that you can couple things into. There's all computers. There are actually takeoffs on the fuse box behind the glove box on most manufacturers. You can take power off that. The thing to be careful of is the amperage. The battery will take up to, if you go through the bulkhead and you connect to the auxiliary battery, you can do up to about 120 amps, which will power most equipment. The fuse box in the car or any auxiliary takeoff in the car will probably up to about 20 amps or round about 40 amps, depending on what takeoff. The reason behind that is if you have a caravan or something like that, you need to actually get some kind of takeoff, tow bars, that sort of stuff. So it is all there, but you just have to be careful. I always say the same. If you go into any garage that's doing it and you just have an electric car or a hybrid and you explain what you want to do, most lads will be more than happy and actually show you where to take the power off. They'll ask you what amperage you're taking. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got the idea there's some takeoff points.
Oh yeah, there is.
Battery.
Yeah, they're all over the place. You just need to know where to look. It's if you go in there and start just hacking into things. The big one we have, the big thing is to fit these dash cams now, and they go into places like Halfords or wherever and fit the dash cam, and they go down to the glove box, take the glove box out, and there's the fuse box, and they just get a little voltmeter on. Ah, right, yeah, that's all right. Connect into that, and away you go. But then it starts throwing up some anonymous readings, because what's happened is they've tacked into a 12-volt data wire. So the 12-volt data wires are very critical to within 0.1 of a volt. And suddenly they're being drained a little bit from the dash cam, which isn't much, but it's enough to think there's actually a fault with the system. And they start warning lights coming on, and car won't start, and brakes apply on their own, and things like that. Yeah. Because if anybody knows about mechanics, an old car has a brake servo, which works from a vacuum, which works from the inlet manifold. So as the engine's running, it draws air, and the servo works. You don't have an inlet manifold, so therefore you don't have a servo. It's all done electronically with electric motors using sensors on the brake pedals. So if you go into them sensors and you interfere with them, or you draw a little bit of current off that shouldn't be there, it thinks that a brake pressure isn't being applied or brake pressure is being applied. I just use that as an example because we've had that recently, where somebody wired a dash cam into the negative pickup of the brake pedal, and there was sluggish response on the brake pedal. Yeah. I know somebody asked about three-phase. Why three-phase? The reason is it's a smoother drive, three-phase. They tried it with single-phase, but single-phase at the very low power end where you're just taking up the drive or crawling along in traffic, it's a bit like jolting forward. Whereas with the three-phase, it's a nice smooth. So it feels no different than a petrol car or a diesel car with the three-phase. That's the only reason for going for three-phase. I hope that answers their question.
I've got Roger, and then I've got Terry. Go on, Roger.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chris. That was very interesting. You already answered most of my questions, thanks, in the talk. Like fire resistance. I wondered about the shielding. One thing I've observed, I've got a hybrid. The temperature of the air temperature, or rather the battery temperature, massively affects the range that I've noticed. So from a very hot summer's day, you can nearly achieve the manufacturer's recommended. In my case, it says 40 miles. Well, I've never got 40 miles out of it, but I'll get 35 on a hot day, no problem. Yeah. Cold day, middle of winter, 26 miles. Is that so? So you're losing about 20-30% of your capacity because of the temperature. Is that the same for all batteries?
Yeah, all the same, electric or whether it's hybrid. They're all the same. Even the auxiliary battery, 12-volt car battery, if you put a voltmeter on it, I know some people use them for operating radio and take them out. And there's nothing wrong with that to a certain degree. They're slightly different than other batteries, the way they work. But any leisure battery or anything, you put a voltmeter on it, and it might be fully charged at, you just charged it up, and it's up to like 13.1 volts. You think superb. Put it in the trunk of your car. You go out, go up onto the hills. It's -3. It's snowing. If you put a voltmeter on, you suddenly only got 12.6 volts. Any battery will do that. This is why you have the cooling pipes. The cooling pipes keep it cool when it's red hot, and when it's absolutely freezing, you've got a little heater that heats it up and puts warm water around the batteries to warm it up. The problem with that is, in order to do that, to get maximum efficiency out of the battery, so you've got a nice smooth drive, it takes power to do that, so therefore you have less range. And that's the reason why you got less range when it's cold.
Yeah, I've never seen that advertised anywhere, but my rule of thumb is knock 30% off what the manufacturer tells you.
Yeah,
safe range.
Yeah, you don't see these sort of things advertised. Nobody's ever shouted at me for telling people these things, but I tell them in the workshops and everything, and the general public, and because it's nothing. There's no point in people going off the adverts and thinking they're going to get these absolutely fantastic electric cars if they don't know where all the little foibles are and what's going to go wrong with them and how things can be affected. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody? Any else?
Terry's got a question for you, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Very good so far. I asked the why three-phase, and you gave me an answer. It's just occurred to me, what frequency does that three-phase get applied to the motor? Is it a variable frequency to increase the speed, or
it's
what?
variable depending on what power you need. So the actual frequency is dependent on what the accelerator pedal is. Yeah.
Okay, so more hertz, faster it goes.
Yes. Yeah. So you start to, when you start to, like we talked about the brake pedal, that picks up a signal, and then we start talking about the accelerator, you start to appreciate where all this electrics and computers starts to come in. And if somebody plays around with that, that's why as an active radio ham, when I started playing around with these things, one of the things that popped into my head at dinner time was, I wonder what happens if you put a few hundred watts next to these things. So, you know, I have experimented with gutter mounts, mag mounts, drilling holes and putting, you know, stuff in and doing all sorts of stuff with them just to see, you know. So, yeah, but all that's how it actually, the motor works. It always delivers 400 volts AC, but it's the frequency it delivers it at as to how fast it actually goes. That frequency is picked up from the accelerator pedal, which sends a signal then to the computer, which then converts it into frequency and then starts. So hope that answers the question with that one. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Kevin, you had your hand up. Was that from earlier, or have you got another question?
Yeah, no, just another quick question.
Yeah,
one thing that does worry me, Chris, is the safety aspect of if one of these vehicles has a collision with anything. And I know that you mentioned that the fire brigade won't even go out if there's a fire to an electric car. But I'm not thinking purely of a fire. I'm thinking of a minor accident where the vehicle has had a little bit of a tub. And I'm thinking about all the emergency services, you know, the ambulance people, paramedics, you name it. They could be on a sticky wicket, couldn't they, Over?
Yeah, there's lots of safeties built in. There's actually, if you look, there's 8 major components that carry the high voltage. Each one of these major components has a relay going into it and out of it. So if you have a bump and any of them orange wires go open circuit or short circuit, every relay on the vehicle will be tripped, independently isolating every single thing. Now, there are the batteries underneath. Each battery has its own independent fuse in case that happens, and the modules have a relay in between for each individual one. So if you imagine that, there's something in the region of 90 to 100 relays on the vehicle. So they are fairly safe. We've not come across anything yet that has caused any sort of an issue. They have been tested to the extent where they've been thrown into brick walls and seen how they actually respond and what happens and what's live and what's dead and how and all these relays do actually work. Where we've had the problem with is, as radio hams, we're fairly used to relays and how they work. In the automotive industry, for many, many years, the relays are a thing of the past. They used to have them on spotlights and the relay would work the spotlights, and they've gone over to transistors. So when you get a lot of mechanics, even auto electricians, you start talking about relays, you might as well be talking about valves to them. It's like a thing of the past. That's where the problem we've found, not on the safety aspect. The major problem you've got on the safety aspect is you go over a speed hump wrong, and your car's too low because you might have 4 people in a full tank of juice and you're going away for the weekend. So you get yourself off, but to get to the motorway, which is fairly safe, you have to go through a housing estate. If you bottom the car out, because the relays would trip, the car's safe, but you ain't going away for the weekend, because by the time it goes into the garage and they make sure it is safe and it is something like that, it could be 3-4 weeks before you get your car back. Yeah, so, but they are safe. There's no worry about that. The problem is any lithium-ion battery, it burns like one of these torches, doesn't it, when they go up? So the fire brigade, if you phone up and say your car's on fire, the first question they'll ask is what car is it? If you say electric car, they'll say stand well clear and we'll be out when it's burnt out. Because if you put water onto it or foam onto it or anything, it just makes it even worse. So for that reason, they'll just leave them to burn. They might come out and put a cordon around it and seal it off so nobody goes near it, but they won't try and put it out. So from fire aspect, you just get out of the vehicle and move away as fast as possible. From everything else, you're fine.
Well, I think that's answered it, Chris. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for that. I just want to mention, so what these motors, are they, what are they, 2-pole, 4-pole, 8-pole? What are they normally, Chris?
Are they what, sorry?
The number of poles on the motors, they'll all be the same. Are they 2, 4, 6 or 8-pole?
The 6 pole.
Right,
Yeah.
that's how you get the smoothness then, of course.
Yeah, yeah. It's a combination between that and the 3-phase, and just the way that they're built. I have got another talk which I'll give a couple of times because people were interested in the motors. I don't know what for. I think one gent wanted to use one for robotics. So if in the future you want one on that, I know it's nothing to do with radio, but there's a nice little video in there that actually shows how these motors are assembled on the assembly line. And the magnets in the actual motor are so powerful, you need a special tool that actually pulls the motor apart. Normally you take the ends off a motor, you can pull it apart. You can't with these. They're literally, yeah. But no, it's very, very smooth uptake.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've seen a movie where that's where you can't actually get the stator out. You can't get the rotor out of the stator.
No.
You have to have a special puller to pull it out because the magnets are so strong.
Yeah, which surprised me because if you get such a powerful magnet, I thought the casing is going to be magnetic. It's aluminium, you're going to feel it. But I don't know. You go there with a compass and it points towards it, but you can't feel the magnetic force, and yet the magnets are so powerful inside. So strange.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks anyway. Thanks for that, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, I've got Ken. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Good evening, Chris. Really incredible. That was about the cars. But I've got 2 questions.
Yes.
Totally different as well. Firstly, will it really be the end of amateur radio when it comes to mobile operation?
No.
And secondly, we've got a shortage of skills for young people in this country, a lot of who can't read and write, never mind learn about electronics to this degree. Yeah. Where are we going to get the mechanics, or is that the wrong word, the electricians, to be able to go in all the garages to deal with these problems?
Well, this is the problem we have at the moment. I'll deal with the second question first. Mechanics as they are, because I've been mechanicking now for over 40 years. Time served apprentice and everything when it was old carburetors, points and condensers. I moved through the ranks and up to where we are now. So I've gone with the flow. The problem is the old time mechanics think mechanicking is pure mechanicking, banging the spanners, taking gearboxes out, stripping them down. And I've seen so many mechanics, as what we know as mechanics, leave the industry because they don't want to play around with electrics. The new ones that are coming in are struggling with it, and it is going to be difficult. And at the moment, there is a lack of knowledge, a lack of skill, and a lack of expertise out there. My brother-in-law works as an electrician. He works in factories doing rewires and that sort of thing. And because I deal with electrics, we've talked, and he has told me straight, as an electrician, he will not play around with electric cars because he deals with mains voltage, and he says 400 volts AC at 3-phase. He said, I ain't putting my fingers in there. He said, I don't even know whether my screwdrivers would stand that sort of voltage. The tools that are needed are all specialist tools and everything. The industry has taken an absolute massive hit on this. So, yeah, where it finishes, I don't know. But at the moment, there is a total lack of skill.
I mentioned it, Chris, because I used to work in a school, partly doing a bit of teaching as well. And I can say to you that most of the youths, most of the teenagers coming through today wouldn't understand anything what you said tonight about these cars.
I fully understand that because we're in the process at the moment of taking on apprentices. We always do around this time of year. We've taken on 4 apprentices and we've got rid of 4 apprentices because they can't handle it. So that shows you the condition that it is at the moment. As for the government, if you go onto the continent, it is illegal for anybody to work on an electric or a hybrid car unless they are qualified. So that means they have to sit not only the mechanicking courses, they have to also sit a special electrics course. In this country, it isn't illegal, but the manufacturers, so all your manufacturers like Hyundai, Mazda, Citroën, Peugeot, have all opted in for the safety aspect, which means as a main dealer, you have to be qualified to work on electric vehicles. So you can imagine there's not many out there. Where it falls back in this country is you can take your electric car into Joe Blogg's motor and he can work on it and get fried and there's no comeback because there is no legislation in this country. But again, that's down to politics and law and legislation. On the continent, unless you're qualified, you can't work on it. It's illegal. So yeah, so I think 20 years down the line, I can see there being a major problem, major problem. I'm seeing it now where I'm getting phone calls from mechanics that I've known that are very good at the job, struggling with these electric cars. Because of what I do here, I'm more clued up than most, to be honest. As for the first question, the death of amateur radio, no, it isn't. I think there's going to be a change. It's a bit like we've gone from the old valve to the transistor radios to SDR, and we've adapted and we've gone with it. We're going from cars that run off 12 volts. We adapted when wagons became 24 volts and we build a lot of stuff our own, don't we? So we started then making stuff that just put some resistors in that so you can put your 12 volt stuff in, we put volt, you know, so as radio hams, we've learned how to do this and adapt. It isn't the death of electrics in the car. Where I see a problem with amateur radio is people are going to have to start thinking outside the box. When you go mobile, you can come into me and I'll tell you exactly where to pick up, what amperage you can use and everything. So you put your rig in your car, absolutely superb. You got your 12 volt power, superb. Then you come to your aerial. Most cars, in order to get the maximum miles per gallon out of them, they're made out of a composite material or plastic. Well, as we all know, an aerial needs either a mag mount or a gutter mount or a ground plane, doesn't it? So how do you get that with plastic? So you're going to the stage now where you're going to have to fit ground planes, counterpoises to your mobile antennas. So it's a change and it's a different direction. You know, my car has a plastic roof. So what I've done is I've dropped the headline in. Now I know not everybody can do this. On the negative side, the braid side, I've run a piece of counterpoise, zigzagged it across the roof, then put the headlining back up, and it works. It gives me a good SWR on HF. Not everyone can do that, but again, we've got to think outside the box. I think at the moment where you're seeing a lot of people out mobile, parking up on the hills, they'll go from that to maybe portable to start off with, where they have to park up and then put an aerial outside. Or the other side of it's going to be where they're going to have to start rethinking things, re-engineering things, and start thinking outside the box.
Well, quick comment. You don't see many radio amateurs with magnetic mount aerials and Delboy type cars. That's the obvious answer. Yeah. That's number one. Number two, regarding the skills, then I've got to say, well, you've got a shortage of skills building houses. God knows how we're going to deal with educated boys and girls. We're going to have a degree from university to understand a lot of this.
It's fairly basic. I'm one of only a few that understand it at this level. And what most manufacturers do is, to give you an idea, your car comes into the garage, anybody's car comes into the garage, no matter what it is, petrol, diesel, or whatever. There's a certain level that it's up to. So in other words, if the lads know how to fix it in the workshop, they'll fix it. If not, they have a computerized system that does like a basic fault finding, which has got the most common faults that happen in that particular vehicle and for that particular fault code or whatever. So they'll follow this particular fault. If they feel uncomfortable with that, or they feel that they need to then go in a different way, or they're not even certain what's going on, they've always got what they call the technical helpline to fall back on. Now, the technical helpline is people that you can phone up, send an email to, do a video link to, where you can ask questions, you can probably try and get some answers, guidance, and which way to go and how to do it. And that's where the poor people like me that sit there that aren't even working on the car try and come up with the solutions on how to fix it, because we know the development and how it works and, you know, and this sort of thing. So the younger ones that are coming in, the hope is that they will come in at the basic level, and over a period of about 20 or 30 years, they will get up to the skill level that's required. And in the meantime, we're filling that void. The problem you've got at the moment is people are coming into the motor industry. You think of mechanicking. Now, you've got young lads at 2021. The fathers are, you know, they leave college now, I think, is it 18 to 21? The fathers are in the 30s, 40s, they're old style mechanics. So when they talk about mechanicking, they're thinking they're taking cylinder heads off, they're doing smart plugs. So they come into the industry and suddenly find it isn't like that. They're faced with hybrids and electrics. Now, even though they got the help, they suddenly realise this isn't the job for them. So they're staying for 12, 18 months and then going. And that's the problem. It's the commitment that is, when you come into it, it's not a job, it's a career. The same with building, the same with plumbing, the same with glazier. It is a career, and we're just not getting that commitment. So I understand what you're saying, and that's one of them. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for it. The answer's out there with the teachers. Our current apprentice at the moment is a girl. She's been with us 3 years. She's becoming fully qualified now. She does her exams in a few weeks. A cracking girl, and she can really do the job. No problem there. But when she first started, one thing we did find, when she come from college, she was recommended. And whenever we said, have you done this, have you done that? She always said, no, they didn't teach us that. They said we won't need that. No, we won't do that. And in the end, I said, why did they say that? She said, well, they only taught us what we needed to know for the exams. Now, I find that strange. But that was my answer I got.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
thanks for the answers.
Yeah, I'm being honest, I don't have an answer to it, but I do see there being a major problem about 20 years down the line. Because the old timers, I'll be honest, I'm 56 now. In 9 years, I retire. No matter what, I retire. Who's going to take my place? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm doing, to give you an idea how bad it is at the moment, and I'm not knocking it because I've loved this industry and I've loved what I've done, but my average week is 60 hours a week. So,
yeah. Thanks for the answers. We cleared up that one.
Might not be what you wanted, but that's the answers, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Right, probably got time for one more, so we'll take Terry and then we'll wind up this bit. Go on, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. Just looking at the skill set of people in the industry, even now, let alone building the skill base of many people as more and more vehicles need mending. How competent is your dealership who sells and mends, presumably, electric cars? I'm not very keen on even mechanics. Having been told I need a new door handle because the little springer's broken. So how is it with electric vehicles and the ability of people to mend it?
It's exactly the same. Mechanicking skills are mechanicking skills. And a lot of it is tied down by the manufacturers. I've got to be honest. Take today, for instance. I'm looking at a Citroen, and if anybody's seen them, they've got these blinds in the back window that come out the doors. No problem, pulls up. The customer's got hold of it and pulled it too far, and it's broke the spring inside. So I'm thinking, right, new spring, strip it down, repair it, whatever. No, it's under warranty, replace it. Right. That part is £1,700. Now, I thought, right, I'll get the old one off and then I'll have a look, see what it's like. The old one, now all this is, if you imagine, is a broken spring. Now, I have no problem fixing a broken spring. If I can put this lot back, if I can put this lot together, I can fix a broken spring. You can't buy the spring to make it worse, the box has been glued shut. So you can't get into the box without breaking the box. But then to make it even worse, the box has been glued to the door trim. So you can't get the box off without breaking the door trim. So the manufacturers have decided they'll assemble this, make it impossible to fix. You can't buy the part, and then turn around to a mechanic and say, if a customer comes in, you explain it. Yeah. So the mechanics know what they're doing. The mechanics can fix them, even the electric cars. There's no problem there. A lot of the issues are the manufacturers are setting out what can be fixed and what can't be fixed, because what they're saying is there's no need for that to be fixed. If it breaks, just replace it, and therefore it's a new part. And then when they do that, they literally glue it all together and weld it together or do whatever they need to do. So that's when you go in and it just looks like a little door handle's broken and it wants a spring, and the mechanic turns around and says, sorry, you want a full door handle. It isn't that he can't fix it. It isn't that he can't repair it. It's just he can't get hold of the parts. Yeah. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, sadly.
Yeah, I know it's not always the answer you want, but I'm one of them. When customers come into our place, I'm very truthful with them, because sometimes I always think you'll go away and you'll think, pardon the French, bloody mechanic, winding me up there, he's ripping me off and that sort of thing, and it isn't. It's just our hands are tied. It really, really is. There's been customers I've said to them, I said, leave it with me for a couple of days and I'll make the part. And I've done that before today to save them a lot of money. But there's some lads out there don't have the gear that I have. In the corner, I do engine rebuilds as well. And in the corner of the workshop, I have a lathe and a milling machine. Not every garage has that. So, but the skill set for the people that are working is very, very high nowadays. Very high standards, and they know what they're doing. So you can trust the mechanic. Where it comes unstuck, and this goes to anybody, is your receptionist. It is. The information goes from the back workshop to the receptionist, because the reception, at one time, the reception person, whether it be a man or a female, was an ex-mechanic, and they could pass the information on and relate to you as it is. Today, it's somebody who's sat some exams. So when a mechanic says such a thing and such a thing, the person on reception will turn around and say, it's broke, you want a new one. That's what the workshop said, it's broken, it wants a new one. It's the information that's being relayed because the person on the front doesn't understand. Never ever be afraid to ask the question, anybody, when you go into a garage, can I speak to the mechanic? And you will find out more information on exactly what's wrong and exactly what's needed to fix it. Yeah. I always say this to everybody. When a customer brings a car in for me to look at, when you come back, ask for me and I'll talk to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the evening. Very good.
Yeah, I'm just going to say thank you. It's been a very, very interesting talk, Chris. And can we show our appreciation to Chris for his contribution tonight in the normal way? Thank you, Chris.
Nobody fell asleep then.
Yeah, I don't think anyone fell asleep. Lots and lots of information there. It was fascinating and lots to think about. And I think the point you made, Chris, about the infrastructure not being there yet, it's going to take a few years for that to catch up, isn't it? Well, and when it does, we'll all be able to use these things. But
yeah, if you ask any mechanic that works on these electric cars, they'll all tell you the same thing. I'll have one tomorrow, but the infrastructure isn't there. Yeah.
All right. Well, Chris, look, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
It was very good to have you. I'm just going to stop the recording. So thank you, everybody.